Hello, this is Red Jerry from Hooj Choons. You're listening to the Liverpool Connection podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm your host Daz. This is my music and football episode where I bring on a DJ, producer or musician to talk about the two loves, which is music and football. My next guest, I probably spent a lot of money buying a lot of the tracks that he's played, that he's remixed, and also had one of the best labels in the 90s and early 2000s, Hooj Choons, and he is the co-owner and also goes by Jerry, but most people will know him by Red Jerry. Welcome to the pod, mate. We're going to have a great chat about music and footy. He's also a Spurs fan, so there'll be probably some banter, some tears and some laughter, I would think.
Absolutely. Just the usual for Spurs fans, definitely.
I want to talk music first with you, Jerry. You've had a massive influence on the music I listen to. Hooj Choons was in probably everybody's box back in the day. It probably still is to this day. Not just because I feel it wasn't defined by one sound, because you could have disco on there, trance, progressive house, breaks. But I do want to know your roots and influences. Going back to like Little Jerry. What was being played in your house, and did it have like an influence on your like musical landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think my own little musical odyssey, so to speak, such as it was pretty typical of people of my age, my kind of precise age almost, because when I got to like 12, 13, just two-tone absolutely blew up everywhere and ska. And that was just, as a youngster, it was so easily accessible and fun. And looking back, it was quality music as well. So much of that still sounds, it's got proper longevity. So I two-tone very early, not very early, but sort of 78, 79 when I was 12, 13. But as with everything, then it moved very quickly. And by 80, 81, certainly towards 82, 15, I went around a little circle. I went from everything from sort of psychobilly and sort of the Meteors and bands like that. Not the Stray Cats. I mean, that was the pop end of it, but just around. So I lived in Camden, so that was a very big thing around there. And sort of, I say that as psychobilly, but also rockabilly, and also sort of garage ends of that, as they used to call it, garage, not dance garage, but like bands like the Milkshakes and stuff, who would, I think, really quality music. Almost within a year of that, I'd got into like soul, and certainly not from a connoisseur's point of view. But at 15, 16, sorry, my dog's here. I started to get into the sort of radio DJ Greg Edwards, and it's very, very, it's very famous kind of well-known radio DJ at the time. And just I couldn't go out; I was too young to go to the clubs. But I got into roller skating, which my wife still laughs at to this day because she just can't picture me sort of roller skating. But I kind of got into roller skating, going to this place called Jubilee Gardens down in Covent Garden, which was a roller disco. It was also soul and two-step, as they used to call it then, bits of disco or post-disco. I used to go to Hyde Park on Saturdays or Sundays, and there'd just be a huge gang of sort of mainly black lads, but mixture, soul boys, but all on their skates. They're going kind of steam through the West End. And so, I got into that subculture. A year and a half later, I was sort of wearing a sort of long coat and listening to Echo and the Bunnymen, and really got into sort of the Bunnymen for a while. I used to love this band, Theatre of Hate, and then Spirit of Destiny. I say all of that. I went through a Clash obsession, probably in between two-tone and, no, a bit later than that. Clash has stayed with me to this day very much so. I'd never don't enjoy things like Sandinista and Black Market Clash and etc. So it's a total smorgasbord really, but it's not quite as chaotic as it sounds now, not quite as disjointed. It seemed to be like that at the time. You go around and
I think the same thing for me. I think when you 14 to like 17, you go through so many like musical and fashion changes. My
Yeah.
dad, he's a Brummie, and he went to school with Ozzy. So
Oh, really?
he was a big rocker. So all I heard in the house was like Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, and it kind of, I wore the studded denim jacket with,
Wow, you did that.
yeah, for,
Amazing.
for like a year. But then the next year I was a mod because I
Right.
first heard the Jam,
Yeah.
Paul Weller, and I was like, I like that. And then the Soul Boy,
Yeah.
and then I was a Teddy Boy for a while.
No.
Yeah, I had some deep,
Actual Teddy Boy. Not, we're not talking rockabilly. You're talking Teddy Boy.
yeah, Teddy Boy,
Wow.
yeah, and I'd grease the hair back. I'd have the Beetle Crushers, the kind of long velvety jacket. Yeah, and
That,
this is in
that
the space of like 3 years.
that's quite left field.
It is. I didn't know where I was coming and going, but then I went back to being a mod because
Yeah.
I just, I love two tone and the mod stuff, and yeah, I
Mod just always look good and kind of is good, doesn't it? It has a sort of timeless style to it, doesn't it? It's at its best.
I think that's why, I love me Fred Perry still. It's just
Yeah.
a classic look. I never did like the suspenders, the braces. Never did that.
Yeah.
It was more like, the nice shirt and tie and
Yeah.
pants, and then obviously your loafers and stuff. But yeah, it was a good look. And then obviously, the 80s synth music started to come. And I was the same. I loved Echo and the Bunnymen, obviously from Liverpool as well. So
Yeah.
it's big a bit, Joy Division. I was
Yeah.
like, again, the lyrics. As a teenager, I think you start to listen to lyrics a little bit more. When you're about 10 or 12, you're just like, music's music. But then when you hit a certain age, you start to listen. And I was gobsmacked by what I was hearing, like especially out of Manchester too,
Of
really good
course.
music. So yeah, that's I always ask this question. It's always nice to hear like different, some people will go, yeah, me mum and dad influenced me music, or yeah, we never heard anything in our house. But for you also, um, you know, Top of the Pops was obviously massive back then in our day. Were your family kind of the same? Because I think it was every Thursday night, right? Would you do the whole
Yeah.
family
No, not at all.
sits? No?
I just don't want to. No, not at all. There was just none of that. I was at boarding school from 7 anyway, and there just wasn't that kind of home. Yeah, it was slightly dysfunctional. My mum's a single mum, and she was. There's no that shouldn't really affect it because she had me when she was 18, so she was still very much into her music and stuff. But the only music I remember then was always from her was always like Carly Simon and Roberta Flack and lovely stuff, but none of it very sort of Carole King. So all this really nice stuff, but nothing I associate with Top of the Pops or watching Top of the Pops. I used to watch Top of the Pops, but never with my mum, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a Thursday night thing for
Oh,
my
it's fantastic. I mean, it really was.
family.
Occasionally, I'll on a Friday night, being a old git, sat with the wife and just a random Top of the Pops comes on, and you just can't believe. Admittedly, that the thing that gets confusing is when they put a random one on, you forget they are condensing a year's highlights into. Often it's not one show from that 1986. It is a year's worth. But my God, it is. You sound like old moaners, but it'd be hard pressed to think about what you would compress from 2024 into a Top of the Pops and compared to what some of those years used to throw up. So yeah, it was seminal. And then onto the Tube after that. And then Jules Holland after. Yeah, now we're just listening pop and music programs. But it does feel like quite a stark contrast to what I say that just because occasionally I do try and listen to Radio 1 now. I really do just occasionally try and spend 10 minutes with it, and it's near impossible. It's I think that again we're off into a moany old git territory, but the rise of the TikTok track and TikTok sourced music does make it think it makes it ever harder for pop music to relate to it and connect with it. But anyway, that's another issue altogether.
Yeah. We can have a whole new episode on talking about
Yeah.
TikTok and all that rubbish, but I'm not going to waste my breath on
No.
this. So when did you start? Like, obviously the acid house scene started in London. The Trevor Fung and Oki and
Yeah.
Annie Ramplin.
Human. Yeah.
When
And
did
I've
you
been
start to get into that?
Yeah, and just fantastically. So I was born in 67. So I was 20 in 87. I was clubbing properly by 85, 86. Because we were all in North London, and Judge Jules and Norman J and Soul to Soul started doing their big warehouse parties called Shake and Finger Pop and Soul to Soul. They were actually called Soul to Soul at times as well, but Shake and Finger Pop and Soul to Soul. And they were just fantastic. All funk disco, decent disco. We're not talking pop disco, but Jackson Sisters, I believe in Miracles, and Maceo and the Max across the track. It just all that kind of fantastic pre-acid house, revivalist and new soul and funk, etc. I'd still remember the day we heard our first house record there, and I presume it was Jack. I don't remember which one. I think it was Jack Your Body. One of those first, because there was Jack Your Body and then another one that was Sam. And I remember hearing that at the warehouse, either early, I think it must have been early rather than late. And my mate James Wilson said, "Yeah, this is one of those house records," and it just sounded. It didn't do anything. It was not a very full dance floor. It was probably early on, and it just didn't sound right on the system. It just sounded big and echoey and not much happening. And obviously, none of us on East. It was little bits of. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it, but bits of speed, booze, and weed kind of thing. And just there was no connection at all. I then went off to university and just missed bloody everything. It didn't even go to anything relevant until 89. And I remember the first girl who had E's at uni, and I was very much trying to get into it. And my mate in London was starting to go to stuff, but it wasn't until 89 when I finished uni and went was living in Clapham. I started to go to this place, the Wimble pub, which is where everyone went after the raves, and I started hanging out there. And so I was pretty late. It was 89 onwards, really. And I must. It's one of those regrets. They say you shouldn't live with your regrets, but I just can't. I never quite get over that regret. It would have been so easy. I'd been doing it for two and a half, 3 years before that. So how I couldn't end up at Shoom in the. But having said that, my mate Phil, who started, I started Hooj with, he was the one that normally took me to the best. We started going to the place, the Mud Club, which was a big thing in the West End, the kind of hipster sort of thing, pre-acid house. He started going to Taboo, which really was the most fantastic Lee Bowery, really cutting edge stuff, pre-acid house again. But he totally missed Shoom as well, and Trip and Future, etc., etc. So yeah, real glitch and. Yeah, bad thing to have missed, really, but there you go.
Well, that's why you have people like Trevor Fung to tell you the stories.
Yeah.
I had him on a few weeks ago, and it was, because there was a disconnect. Obviously, what was happening in London at the time was different from Liverpool and Manchester. Manchester had like early Hacienda, and they would barely play acid house. So listening to Trevor was like taking me down like a long, lovely, historic road. And, it was nice to hear like how he kind of, did his future parties and everything. And I was like, I was loving it because, I kind of missed that. And, I don't think Trevor really gets the,
He's not as high focus as the rest of that lot, as Mookie and Rambling and Holloway. But having said that, I see him turning up on DJ bills all the time at the moment, so people know he's not. I don't think he's discarded or forgotten. But when you talk about Manchester and London, etc., I mean, there's no two ways about it. Wasn't Pickering's night in the Hacienda? Didn't that start late '86? Nude.
Yes, it did.
Certainly by '87. So I mean that they were undoubtedly before Shoom in London. So I mean, they were, and then also there's that clip on YouTube of these guys. I think they're called Jazz Warriors. This black dance crew in not in Moss Side, but somewhere else. It was Rush Home or one at a kind of little warehouse party in '86 ish, all doing jazz dancing to whichever house record it was. Brilliant house record, really obvious one that I've forgotten. So they again, this London centric thing, which literally begins on the dot with Shoom, is just yeah. I don't think that stands up, but anyway, regrets. I have a few, as they say.
Well, it's nice to hear, like, I obviously, the anniversary of the governor's passing, and I always love to, go on YouTube and listen to, because he was such, not just a great, producer and musician and remixer, and just a very, very intelligent man. And it was great to hear him. I saw him on an interview talking about like the London scene, but then he said when he went to Manchester and he went to the Hacienda for the first time, he was like opened his eyes more, because he's like, there was something gritty about the Manchester scene as well.
That's interesting. I've never seen that interview. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's a 30-minute interview, and he's actually in Manchester, and he's naming all these things, and he's actually asking the camera person, "Am I right? Am I right? Was this here?" And the lad's like, "Yeah." So yeah, I mean, he's just one of these people that I look up to.
Yeah, totally.
And
that lot, just the whole of that lot, and Farley, and just the whole of that west, out west, not West London out to Slough and everywhere else. They're what they did early doors, so to speak, was it shaped so much. It's when you look at some of those photos from Shoom and other places, they're just all dotted around there. I mean, Weatherall looks like 14 in one of the Shoom photos that I've seen. They're fantastic. They were an amazing, and then obviously Boys Own just became, the actual fanzine just became, for me, was just absolutely kind of crucial in not so much understanding, but connecting with the obviously, calling it Balearic, but then straight away Progressive House became, original progressive from sort of 91-ish. I don't think it was called it till 92. But Boys Own, strangely now, when you look back at Faith, fanzine, and all the way back to Boys Own, but they really were kind of central in this burgeoning progressive thing. I mean, you get like Fabi Paras, sort of photos in there and jokes about Fabi Paras and Full Circle. It's just a sort of in-house aficionados of everything. It felt like for a while, didn't it? Boys Own. So yeah,
it did. I mean, like Faith fanzine, I used to get it as well. Because it wasn't just about music, it was about fashion, it was political as well.
Yeah.
There was a fanzine in Liverpool as well at the time. Peter Hooton would put it out from the farm.
Oh, the end.
Yeah, the end. And I used
that
to
was
get
much more political. That was much more political.
Yeah,
really,
very much so. And tongue in cheek as well. Whoever was writing the jokes was fucking spot on.
Boys Own or the end?
Well, both.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They mixed it all with that kind of quite smart ass bounce. It was so spot on. It was really, the humour side of it was so good. Their uppers and downers, etc., just all of it. It was so well pitched. And I don't want to get into horrible sort of sociological stuff, but it was, these were working class fanzines. These weren't just middle class, kind of punk, post punk, etc. There was a lot of good fanzines, things like Vague but this is the first thing I remember. Certainly the end was the very first, I think, to some degree, the first prominent one. It was called The End, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That followed by Boys Own. I know Boys Own was totally influenced by obviously The End, but they were the first sort of, working class, directly sort of owned and created. I'm sure it wasn't full only, but and I don't want to get over fixated on the class aspect, but I think that just brought a whole new layer to it, didn't it? It was amazingly done stuff. And Faith fanzine has sort of kept it going, really, and obviously is now back via Defected.
Yeah, yeah.
which is
It's great to see. I think because it was put out by people that look like us,
yeah,
acted like us, it made me part of something, you know.
yeah,
Um, I had Dave Haslam on here last year, and he put out a fanzine in Manchester. I've forgotten the name of it, but he cites Peter Hooton and the
yeah.
Faith Boys, in doing it, and yeah, it just made me feel like something. And I think that's why the music spoke to me as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's great music. Their music. I mean, we talk about all the bands, the football, the in jokes and everything, but the music, it was just that was beyond question, wasn't it? They were absolutely, yeah. The Boys Home was just sort of slightly the be all and end all for a while, wasn't it? It felt
Yeah,
like.
yeah, and anything that came out on Junior Boys, you're buying it. I mean,
Yeah, and they're spread of when you think about it from Weatherall and Primal Scream all the way across to Hella and Farley, even early days, they were quite, I think, from what garage, the more garagey and soulful house thing and housey house, they covered it. It was quite a wide range as well musically. It wasn't just all focused around because there was that progressive thing at the start, but that quickly diversified for the Boys Own lot, didn't it? So yeah, really impressive stuff goes without saying, and very influential. Talking of which, as a little aside, Dave Haslam, I wouldn't admit it in polite company, but he blocked me on Twitter during the Corbyn wars. So you'll never know. It's from an account that it's not anonymous, so it's not some. But I was always very disappointed to be blocked by Dave. But anyway, that's a small.
ouch. Well, when did you start DJing first, or did you
No,
do?
not at all. Christ, no, not at
No?
all. That was I never DJ'd for as long as I kind of couldn't or not could. I just didn't want to, and then eventually I just got too good an offer. And I did want to, I had decks and I'd always DJ at home for the afters and stuff like that. And eventually I did a gig in Australia, which I hated, was terrifying. DJing wise, I've just had the most horrible on-off relationship with to this day. I actually DJed 2 weeks ago, back to back with my son for the first time in a properly crazy Bristol venue, which is a bikers pub, a Hell's Angels pub in Bristol, in the basement. Just my fantastic little party that they put on there. These quite young, kind of very acid house actually, but I absolutely couldn't have enjoyed it more. The booth monitor just everything about it was just so easy and it all worked so well. I have other gigs which I just hate. I can't, half the mixes I feel like are falling apart. I lose where I am, and when if I'm not, because I started on USBs late, and then the latest, I've always been quite slow because I'm only playing 2 or 3 gigs a year at the moment nowadays anyway, so always slow to adopt new formats, etc. And so when you DJ twice, 3 times a year, and especially if they stick you on a stage, which I always hated to, it could be, I find it so nerve-wracking. Other times, like 2 weeks ago, it was fantastic. I'd do it all day. I wanted to play all night. So anyway, DJing, it started like that in sort of 2000, 95, 94. I've always found it very nerve-wracking. Eventually, when I was doing my own night, and also DJing every week, it just all felt so easy, even with vinyl as it was then. So yeah, love-hate relationship with it, mainly hate, but occasionally love, and yeah. So
Well,
that's
it's changed so much, hasn't it? I mean, back in the day, usually the DJ booth would be in a corner where you
yeah,
could barely see him. Now, obviously, it's you know right in front of you, and you're the main thing for everyone to look at. Which I always like. What year did everyone go? All right, I'm going to turn to the DJ. So I don't remember that. I remember
nah.
just dancing the way I want to dance, but everyone now has to look towards the DJ like there's some little messiah.
And
It,
I mean, it's like everyone's sort of saying the same thing. Not everyone, but it's such a growing chorus now. The combination of phones, constant phones, and everyone facing the stage. It's just not healthy. Having said that, when you say everyone's saying it, I do see this divide. So my son who DJs a lot in Bristol, because I went to another little do of his where I didn't DJ like a month ago, just almost accidentally. We were at a friend's thing. So I've been to 2 things in Bristol in 5 weeks, both of which the DJ, you would never know where they were. Really genuinely quite wild little parties, really druggy house. That seems to be because he's into this whole scene of this really sort of left field druggy house. People with balloons, and there's no facing the DJ booths there, and the energy is incredible. So I think that the facing the stage with the DJ on the stage and with phones, that's one end of the thing. But of course, that's the end that makes all the money. That's the one that gets all the attention. That's the one with the big venues. That's the one that has all the commercial clout behind it, and it looks crap. So there's a real contradiction, real paradox here. They need to sort out, whereas the underground, and my son never seems to get paid for DJing, even though his name's on quite reasonable. I mean, he's 20, so he's very early. So money-wise, there ain't a lot going on, but the actual energy and the vibe of the thing just looks fantastic. So meanwhile, big venues are closing. Sasha Lord is trying to get government intervention to shore up the industry, etc., etc., etc. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But the DJs on a stage thing, I think do you know Ben UFO? Ben UFO. He's one of those kind of, I'd say, new waves. He's been going for about 10 years plus, but DJ as he's known. But he did a gig, I think it was early last year at Coco, ex Camden Palace, but Coco in Camden in London. On the flyer it said DJ booth on the floor. It was actually a feature of the thing, which I thought was amazing, an amazing thing to actually advertise it as such. But and obviously you've got the Berghain and also the White Hotel and others, Berghain in Berlin, White Hotel in Manchester. There's no phones there. There was no phones at the one I went to, the 2 I've been to. I don't know if they're actually banned or just no one does it, but just no one does it. So yeah, you can see there's some attempt at self-correction going on, but whether that works for the bigger end of the market, is yet to be seen, really.
Yeah, you give me a club with dark lights.
Yeah, of course.
Sound system, and that's all I need. I don't need visuals. I don't need, and I think that's overtaken the music in the bigger clubs and the festivals. It's like, fair play to them, like Tale of Us. It's all a lot about the visuals, more the music. On for me, it's music all day long, and
sure,
again. Sometimes I get down, going down this tangent of sounding like an old fart, back in my day, blah, blah, sweat from the ceiling, dripping and all this. But it's just, I don't go out much. I mean, I have 4 little ones, so they keep me preoccupied. But, these days I have to be dragged to go see a DJ or go see a band. I'm just not in it anymore. If I want music, I've got it all here. I do me Friday nights here with me kids. I have a Friday night dance party, like 2 hours of me playing and then looking at me going, "What is it?" And
I'd say one thing about these couple of, I'm sure they're not wholly representative of Bristol or any other scene, but both the things I went to, my son had persuaded me, because we ended up with taking my wife, some mates and everything to the Hells Angels one, the bikers one. And you really didn't feel particularly out of place as an oldie. Because for a start, the Angels, loads of them are like 60. They're just big old buggers, beards, and they're all doing stuff in the club. They're running bits of it and doing all sorts. But there was actual, you don't feel like that much of a, which is another really encouraging thing. I mean, there's no way I'm going out every week or every month ever again, but I actually feel like I could creep back into, I stand in a dark corner and, as you say, just enjoy it. There's no stage. So I do like it, because on the other hand, I mean, I played one oldies gig, because there's obviously so many oldies gigs now, and fair play to them, but when, like, was it last year, the year before, where I have to agree what I play 50%. I mean, they just want simply, there has got to be 50% Hooj, and it's only the same I can vary but they want also the Hooj that they freaking expect as well. And to do that to people my own age, and I know they probably go out once every 6 months, and it's a real treat. There might be, ladies' nights out and bloke lads' nights out and etc. etc. But my God, people that do that every week, and I'm sure earn great money, but I cannot imagine it. It's hard to imagine. I mean, a lot of Who stuff I simply can't hear. The obvious ones. It's not hard. Of course, it's not hard. You're not working in a freaking coal mine. But to actually just put on Café Del Mar again and stuff, and if there's a stage there, you literally do have to think about sort of. And I just to Café Del Mar for the 6 millionth time. It can be, it can be a bit trying. But yeah, these are first world problems to say the least.
When did Hooj come about for you? Because obviously, you're co-owner with Phil. When did you both go, we should start a record label?
No, yeah, so it's just purely that. It was the accountant made him start. He started a record label just to try and recoup some money, the accountant, on this band. They're called Pressure Point. It was featuring someone called P.P. Arnold, who's a genuine soul legend from the 70s, 60s and 70s. So they had this really quite legitimate project, total turkey, but he had the record label there, kind of record company, so they had a distribution deal, etc. And there was quite a good buzz on just house music and vinyl generally. So he got Phil to start this label. Phil dragged me in, and we started Hooj in 1990. The first 3 records, which are all really good records as well, nothing to do with me whatsoever. They were his. And after about number 4 or number 5, he was immediately poached by Pete Tong, which was pretty early doors considering. But it was, these were early days. So he went and did that. And then it was me from then on. And no great achievements along the way necessarily. Andronicus Make You Whole was I don't know if you know that, but that was our first sort of wider. That was really well received amongst the Boys Own lot. It was in Boys Own, but also it was working at the raves as well, which was kind of unusual. Always has, to have both, because it kind of sits somewhere between the two. And from then on, we got lucky quite early with. I remember the week that because we decided to release Hyper Go-Go and Felix on the same week, just because it was 2 nice 12-inch releases, and that was kind of quite a crazy kind of. I remember it was a fantastic distributor. People who know this guy called Raz Gold, this amazing guy. He ran this dodgy distribution. It wasn't dodgy, it was fantastic vinyl distribution company. When Deconstruction signed both records from us, Hyper Go-Go and Felix, they signed them both together. Decent money, not to me, but to early Hooj man, the guy that owned it. And Raz, they absolutely made us promise to stop pressing the 12s. And we'd probably done 5,000 on each already. We promised them we would just do 1,000 each on the rest of them. Made the distributor guy, Raz, the sharpest, biggest hustler guy, promised us he would, that's all he'd do. And he just went and pressed 5,000 more of each without him. And then, so generating for my boss another kind of 10 grand basically along the way. That's what it was like in those days. There was just, you could sell 25,000, 12 inches as an independent kind of thing. 20,000 as independent. Then Decon turned Felix into a kind of global hit of sorts, etc. So yeah, Hooj had got properly going by 92, really, I guess.
Well, it's great with Hooj, like we were talking before, though, but you had that good balance between commercial and underground tracks. Now, for you also being like A&R for Hooj, what did you look for? If somebody sent you something, what were you looking for the label?
So it's a hard one to answer in any kind of meaningful way. And people have obviously asked it before, but it was always just stuff. I mean, because you said rightly that Hooj has obviously played with all kinds of sounds across all kinds of, across what coming up to whatever 30 years, no, not 30. So across many 25. All kinds of sounds and sort of just subgenres have been sort of mixed up and played with, etc. But if you actually look at it, it does tend to move in blocks. So early on, there was none that it was just sort of post-rave eclecticism. It really was a bit of everything. Rio Rhythm Band, the very first record, is literally Latin meets acid house from this guy Ian B. Eon. So, really eclectic. By the time we got to Felix, you've got Andronicus, which is this very nice electronic kind of prog meets house meets whatever. So genre-wise, by the time we got to Felix, and that was just Euro, as we'd call it, Euro house, Euro, what do you call it? Euro pop. It's only pop if it becomes a pop, but it's kind of Euro, I think people are calling it. And that became a bit of a defining feature for a while for us. Hype Go-Go was a piano banger, which of course will always be there. They're just there throughout house music history kind of thing. So I think we went quite Euro and then drifted into, unfortunately, kind of hard bag, as it was called. The worst name ever. Handbag and hardbag, and I just never could enjoy that. But I was just totally influenced by the clubs I was going to. So Andronicus and records like that, when I got that's when I was going in particular to a club called Full Circle every week, which was this sort of Balearic meets. It was all the Boys Own lot and Slough lot. It was in Slough. No, it's right by Slough. So I was quite influenced by the sound there, and therefore when people sent me stuff like Andronicus, I could kind of associate it with it, and I wanted to sound like certain other records. I mean, that was the main determinant, is this reminds me a bit of that record, and I really like that. In terms of production, obviously you even early on, like it was there, you really realize sort of the bare minimum that you do need to make it an effective record, or hopefully you do. More difficult then because you're getting them on cassettes. Does that make it more difficult? But I don't know, it feels in retrospect, there wasn't this sort of digital clarity and sort of parity with your so yeah, different things. But as soon as I got completely ensconced in trade, just every single week, this ridiculous club at Turnmills, for like 4 or 5 years, then that just totally framed everything for a while. It was very hard to escape the influence of that. Often with good results, sometimes less so. Because I started the Pro Cult label sort of as a reflection of the harder side, also, as influenced by the harder side of trade. And we put out lots of records on there that I really enjoy. Some of the Hooj stuff from that period, I don't like as much now, to say the least. I don't know. And so what I was looking for, one of the criticisms that the online, people on Discogs or elsewhere, if they're critiquing Hooj, one of the things they always talk about is how much is licensed in. How much of it didn't come to us? We weren't the first to put it out, and that's because I was so into sort of European-based stuff for so long. So it was either Euro-y stuff, which Felix was a totally English record, of course, from a young Essex lad, but it's so Euro-sounding. I mean, it had a running sort of marauder bass line and big synths and etc. And so much of what we did, and then we licensed in things like DCO2, Do What You Feel, which you might not know, but we were always licensing stuff in. And obviously, when we licensed in Café Del Mar, and that was like 96, that was from 1992 IQ records in Germany, maybe 93. And I was like, all my afters kind of dues, which was every bloody week, it felt like, after trade. And afters at trade meant Sunday lunchtime. It was pretty intense at times, but all the afters, it wasn't the trade stuff. It tended to be, for a while, it was just all the German 92, 93 trance stuff, like MFS records, IQ, Visions of Shiva, Vernon's Wonderland, so all these. So again, what I was influenced by when I was getting demos is I wanted English or British. I'd love UK producers to be sending me that. It never was. I was always licensing it, LSG from Superstition, or you can just find loads of Euro records, that European records. So that's what the influence was, just mainly, a combination of club I was completely buried in, or this kind of European sound, which I'd got into quite early. So yeah, mixture really.
Do you have a favourite track from the catalogue?
No, not really. You try. I mean, I know what's in my top 5-ish, and I'll now not remember any of them. But no, I mean, Nalin Kane. I mean, you talk about stuff you license in. Lustral was a UK record, very much. I knew Steve from Lustral, lovely bloke I knew from school. But the remix, Nalin Kane, again, 2 European, 2 Germans. I think will always stand the test of time. I'm always happy to hear it to this day. And when I do play out, it's a kind of, I just always enjoy playing it out. It's not all the LSG stuff, just LSG. Netherworld, and particularly this LSG track, Fragile Part 2. That's undoubtedly in my top five. Greece 2000, I think, really stands up as a sort of, for one of those real biggies. I think the combination of the kind of the groove of it, the drums of it, and there's a bit of subtlety there. It's not a big proto EDM. There's no big pads. There's no massive riff. So yeah, there's three. I mean, there's too many more. So there's always five. Things like Café Del Mar, it just becomes a problem because you just can't hear it anymore. So it's not a favorite, but it's so hard to engage with it fully anymore. And I'm sure that's the same for most people. No,
I can't listen to it.
no.
I'll turn the other way if somebody starts it. I'm just like, no, it's not going to change. All the remixes sound the same.
And it's just you almost don't hear. I almost don't hear it. It just is what is a separate entity now. But that's bound to happen for anything. That's all credit to. I mean, I tell you what's weird about Café Del Mar is how long it took me to find out that it was that it was a the music, the pads, the musical progression in the strings, which absolutely kind of defines it, is actually not original. Did you know that? It's from the Wim Wenders piece. I mean, everyone seems to. Took me. It was probably only 10 years ago I found that out. A Struggle for Pleasure. It was a piece from a Wim Wenders film from like the mid-80s, I think. I hope I misquoted that and thinking another one. But yeah, so it's a strange one with Café Del Mar. It's
the Energy 52 is Cosmic Baby, right?
Cosmic Baby and Kid Paul.
Yeah. I loved Cosmic Baby. Heaven's Tears.
Of course, Heaven's Tears.
Wow. It blew me away. And I think everyone knows where they were when they first heard, Café Del Mar. I still remember, but yeah, to this day, I'm just like, no, I can't do it. But I mean, some of my favorites are Medway, the Resurrection EP.
Lovely record. Absolutely.
I loved all the Tilt stuff. Peter Lazzoni, just absolutely fantastic. And it's the first time I actually heard like Peace Division was a
absolutely. I'd love I mean, they all I think all the post-trance stuff stands up so well. And some of the trance stuff, but that stuff I think, and I say that because my son's, I mustn't always refer to him, but he's the only young DJ I know, and he plays out all sorts of bits from the houseier post trance and then progressive and then more tribal. So that stuff just stands up. But having said that, there's people playing trance stuff. There's youngsters playing trance stuff now, aren't there? So yeah, it's you've got people playing everything now. So but yeah, so the top five. One more of those top five, I'd say, lump in together, put the Peace Division, Medway, another couple of, I mean, Halo Varga Future, I still play out. I have to play out when last week I played it out. I mean, that for me is definitely in the top five. That stands up. He's again licensed in, so it's not like we were the A&R geniuses, getting that all made over here. But yeah, that's another favourite. So. Yeah,
that was from Siesta, wasn't it?
It was. It was those. It was Halo Varga. It's Halo and Hippie.
Yeah,
I think. But why did they call themselves Halo Varga? I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it was just Halo and Hippie. Love all those Siesta. They had a great run, didn't they?
Yeah, and I mean, a good like dark tribally sound. But what I can say about like most of the Hooj releases was the production levels were really good.
Yeah, that I think we did again. I mean, because if you shouldn't always go back to bloody Euro stuff, but when you think of those MFS records, the Cosmic Babies, etc., and the Visions of Shiva, the production there, I know where it's coming from. I mean, the Germans obviously had been very influenced by Italo disco. Marauder was German, and obviously post disco, and then onto what you can call it, the stuff. There's a name for it, but the German sort of pop equivalent of disco during the 80s, some of which is obviously appalling. There's a fantastic clip of Sven Vath when he was in exactly one of those in 86, kind of dancing and stuff. But again, production-wise, they just always had this a combination of sheen. It was just big and shiny, but just with that big, quite subtle bottom end, it always pumped. It was just fantastically made. So I guess I was always kind of A-being against that stuff a little bit. You know, when you got a demo and you're in the studio with them, like we did with Felix and so many others, you know, it'd be a bit of a joint effort. JX as well to a degree. We were always A-being and comparing to a lot of that German stuff, which helped a lot. Don't get me wrong, because all the UK progressive producers, I mean, Left Field's production was obviously faultless with Big and lots of guerrilla artists. The production was, but yeah, I think we managed to get on a decent run with production wise over a long period, I hope. Yeah, and it's good when you hear it back. It's nice that it doesn't sound too tinny. Definitely.
I think for me, like, you know, when people actually went to a record shop and bought records, you know, I'd go in every Monday. I mean, my record store in Liverpool was 3-beat. So,
cool.
You know, but over in the States, I would go in there and everyone would obviously run to the new release wall, and it was all Hooj. And I think that's when I started to go, look, I've got to look for something different, because, you know, not because I didn't like Hooj, but it's because everybody was grabbing it. And like, you have to, you know, separate yourself as a DJ and not play what everybody else plays, because then that's just run of the mill. And I think it's a bit boring, you know, if you don't kind of go, all right, well, they're all going to the right, I'm going to go to the left.
No, absolutely.
And do something a little bit different. So yeah, my love affair with Hooj kind of wavered a little bit, just because every time I was out, you know, I just heard Hooj tracks, and not because they're bad. I was just like, fuck me, there's got to be something else out there.
No, definitely. But did that get easier as it got into more tribal and house? Did it become less problematic because it's more beatsy and slightly less? It's not riff. It's not just the riff and the breakdown. What period are you talking? Are you talking
probably early 2000s?
Oh, really? Right. So that, yeah, and that's
I just wanted something different, and especially with being in America at that time, there was a lot of good independent labels coming out.
Yeah.
And they just had, like, I liked the W stuff, W techno, W just like house stuff. I was getting into that. Obviously the tribal stuff, Siesta, I was a big fan of Doc Martin as well.
Yeah.
You know, it was just something different, but I tried to balance, you know, you start your set off with some nice dubby tribal-y stuff, and then, you know, obviously I'd put a couple of Hooj tracks in there, like everyone would know, just to, you know, if the dance floor's a little waning, you put Hooj on, it's packed. That's how it was. You know, it's great. But for you, you know, as you were talking off the camera, you know, you took a break from Hooj. I mean, that's a big break. Obviously, you know, you didn't
totally.
Until, you know.
I mean, I was doing music on the side throughout the whole thing, but just no one noticed. They did. I mean, not completely. I had a whole little run of. I did all sorts of interesting stuff musically. I really covered a lot of ground. I went into kind of the indie world a bit with a band, Friendly Fires, who you may have known. Were, you know, had a really good run. I put out a couple of their singles and managed them at the beginning. But most importantly for me, I did this sort of post dubstep label called Shifting Peaks. Again, long forgotten now, but that was kind of some of my favorite music I've been involved with, really. We put out the first Tesla record with them, where Tesla became Over Mono, who are now, you know, kind of, you know, festival stage headliner type thing. And we put out some really nice stuff on Shifting Peaks. So that did really well for a while. So, and beyond that, I did another label after. I was constantly doing music stuff, but I just couldn't do Hooj. There was no upside. There was no musical. There was nothing I could connect with musically that meant anything for Hooj. So this stuff I was putting out on Shifting Peaks was just stuff I was really into. I'd moved to the Southwest in 2008 anyway, and just Bristol had just dubstep and then post dubstep, you know, from Bristol and then slightly beyond, not quite down here to North Devon. It was just such a hugely influential sound. and such a good sound I always found. So yeah, I got really into that, and there was no way I ever thought, wow, I could start Hooj up again to put this out. Hooj, the Hooj lot are so freaking, the Hooj fan base can be so single-minded. I was going to say narrow-minded, but that would be unfair. But they can be a bit sort of over-focused on certain sounds and quality, etc. So yeah, I was never like getting excited by this music and thinking, shall I revive Hooj? MRC, the people that were in charge of the catalogue, would occasionally just do appalling little re-releases and stuff and terrible remixes, and I kind of just sort of I kind of left them to it. So I think I had really. So I didn't know it was raining, but I basically decided not to do anything with Hooj again. And then some musical stuff started to happen that meant that Hooj could come back, I thought, which was, there was one guy in particular, Ajeka, who started his Trance Wax series of about 2018, 19. He started doing bootlegs of old trance records. Literally, this is hipster. It was hipster trance, and he took Grease 2000 and put breaks under it.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And he did other stuff, and I just thought, shit, it has finally happened. Young people might actually might connect with old stuff again. And that was the point at which I was getting quite a lot of pressure from them, from MRC to do stuff. So yeah, there was kind of signs. Then it felt like not the worst idea. They were paying me a small amount of consultancy money. I do stuff for their other labels anyway. So yeah, it felt like a kind of organic and not forcing it just for their commercial sort of requirements, basically.
No, it's good to see Hooj back. I know, again, we talked earlier about the other Hooj.
Early Hooj, yeah.
Yeah. But I do want to get into the footy. Spurs fan. Why Spurs?
Oh, well, I grew up in North London. I mean, I was much closer to Highbury than I was to White Hart Lane. But my uncle was just lifelong Spurs. He was originally from North London. He lived out in Feltham at that point, but his whole family was Spurs, and I started going with them around the age of 7 or 8. And yeah, it was hooked straight away. Really, it was. Funny times for Spurs because we'd just been relegated and then promoted. I remember the promotion season. I wasn't there for promotion, so I must have been 8 or 9. But I remember it all on the telly. And it was the promotion seemed like such a big, it was a big and a very happy time for Spurs then. And by 81, we won the cup in 81 and 82, UEFA Cup in 84. We were in a League Cup final against Liverpool. No, that a bit later on, which we lost. So, there was, I guess I'm trying to justify why on earth anyone would support Tottenham in a way, but it was a lot of fun, and I loved. I went with my uncle until the age of about 13, and then I was allowed to start going on my own with my mate Phil Houser. We started Hooj with. He was a QPR fan, but just started to come to Spurs with me, and it was pretty mental times for football back then. The subculture around it, and the hooliganism. It was all quite intoxicating, to be honest. And we stood in the kind of hilarious part of the ground, which was the shelf, the back of the shelf from the earlier stages. And as a youngster, whilst it was very intimidating when it all got a bit chaotic, no one came after you because you were a youngster, so to speak. So we were just mini spectators to it all, and just the football. The UEFA Cup final night which we couldn't get tickets for either cup final years before, 81 and 82, but for the UEFA Cup final 84, it was never sure why, but there was no tickets, no pre-sale tickets. You turned up 2 hours. We were there 2 hours before the game. We were there for the 2.25 hours of the game with extra time and pens. Was it extra time and penalties? Yeah. So hour. Yeah, we were there. So the game was 2 hours 15, 2 hours 30. We were there for 2 hours. There for 2 hours after. It's just the most chaotic and wonderful celebrations. So yeah, kind of 6 hours, half an hour for travel. One of the great nights of my life, undoubtedly. So And then after that, yeah, you got the 91. So I'm just listing stuff because it's going to get to a point here. But 91, obviously the semi-final with the Gaza goal, and then the victory in the final. And then really that's it. It's been a tough old, although fun enough, there's a bit of a convergence for me of music and football, which is my last ever out night week, as Mickey Flanagan called last out night, as Mickey Flanagan calls, proper night out, which was 2008. And it was and I can remember this so well because it was the day that Spurs beat Chelsea in the League Cup final. And I hadn't got a ticket for the game, so I'd watched it in the pub. My mates came back from the game, and we just got completely smashed. I ended up in Horse Meat Disco, fantastic club in Vauxhall, gay, super, kind of left field disco club. And yeah, I ended up in there till sort of 4 a.m. Made a bit of a fool of myself, but yeah, just had a proper night out. And the next day I had to go to a rare meeting, stuff I was doing. I had to be somewhere just at midday. And I remember being on the tube and actually having a minor, sort of some kind of meltdown, panic attack, and to get off at Euston Stations, go and buy a little miniature of vodka so I could just sip it covertly on the train just to get myself to this meeting at 1 o'clock. And it was my last ever big night out and one of my last ever real football related. I mean, because Spurs have never won anything since 2008. Yeah, so if you think about it, it was my last ever big night, last ever Spurs victory, all there together. And to be fair, when I moved down to the southwest, I've withdrawn a lot from it. I just do not care in the same way, which is a bit strange. You don't hear old school football fans saying that very much anymore. And it wasn't just because of geographic issues. It wasn't just because of age or anything else. But being a Spurs fan, not only are we're known as the world's greatest moaners anyway, always have been. We haven't won the title since '61, but have always considered ourselves to be something big, a historic club. They call it being Spursy, this just completely inflated idea of what you actually are and what the club represents. But there's been also this continuum, which is we've always had problems with our directors. Going back to the early days, it was Irving Scholar. It was after that, I mean, we had Robert Maxwell for a while. We had Alan Sugar. We've now got Daniel Levy, another one in between. There's always been this huge tension between the over-commercialisation of the club, the lack of money that seems to be spent on players versus what is spent, for instance, when Irving Scholars introduced the first boxes, I think they had hospitality boxes, all the way forward to now where, when the latest ground was built, they were talking about they leaked the plans for the cheese bar, which was just so fantastic. It was almost surreal. They had to abandon it eventually, I think. But and just all the way through, we've had this issue of the exploitation of the club for commercial needs, obviously to the cost of the team. And now you see that obviously everywhere. You see it, Man City, when Man City just spent 200 mil in January, they spent 200 mil, 4 times as much as whoever the second and third, 4 times as much as Spurs spent, and they still haven't been done for the financial fair play rules. We're at this stage now where Saudi Aramco, essentially the Saudi sovereign wealth fund, is just it's not buying titles for City this season, but had a good run of just buying titles for football clubs over here. And it's very hard to connect that with what we were doing and what you would have been doing in the 70s and 80s. It's just, I mean, Liverpool have always managed to keep this sense of integrity. I don't know if back in the, I never even know anything about the Liverpool board or the directors. I can't remember ever hearing about them. It's always about the managers and the fans and players. It's not quite like that at Tottenham. It hasn't felt like it. And certainly isn't like that for City. Man United, now you've got freaking Jim Radcliffe, non-dom, who's saving millions on taxes in living wherever, whilst, sacking his staff and taking away staff lunches and stuff like that before he built a 2 billion stadium, even though they're a billion. Are they a billion in debt? They're a billion in debt. Yeah. And they're building a 2 bill stadium, which will involve all kinds of land grabs. It's just, I don't know. I'd sound like a cynical old git, but I find it a little bit, when City were just winning everything, and it's just silly, isn't it? When you're
Well,
not getting
nobody
done,
cares. Nobody
huh?
cares.
No,
Like when City wins something, nobody cares
it
because
just is
they know
silly.
how it's been won. You know,
Yeah,
and I have to say with City, whatever goes on the pitch, fair play. They've got good players, but it's how they achieve that off the pitch, and
yeah,
that pisses me off. I'm very proud to be a Liverpool supporter because we were in the financial realms of fair play. We've
yeah,
always done it like that. We find little gems, but like you said, we don't really. Well, I mean, half the fan base do talk about FSG because they want us to spend more money.
mm,
They want us to spend like City, the Newcastles, the PSGs, the Real Madrid, but that's not business. That's not. I mean, Madrid, like all you have to look at is like Madrid and Barca, and especially Barca, could barely function as a football club, and they had to take out all these loans. That's not Liverpool.
mm.
I'm proud of the way we do business. But I wanted to ask you, who was your footballing hero growing up?
For anyone in my era, it's always the same for Tottenham. Can you guess? It's always Glenn Hoddle. It's
Yeah,
just
I was about to say Glenn
yeah,
Hoddle.
it's just I mean, as a person, he became a bit strange in later life with his spiritualist and all that kind of stuff. There's control, but as a youngster watching him play, it just still now there's bits of it you see. I mean, his last goal against Oxford where he walks through the yeah, it's just a wonderful player to watch. It felt like for quite a long time. I can't actually remember how many years now, but it felt like quite a long time. And I mean, by the end of it, he was skipper and playing sweeper. He wasn't even just. Everyone thought he was just sort of wearing too tight shorts and chipping it about all the time. But no, he was just. He really was a wonderful player. I mean, I have all sorts from there. There were so many players that I mean, we all loved Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa, not just because they were some kind of novelty, but they were just fantastic players. Um,
The Archibald.
Archibald and Crooks was again, it was another sort of fantastic little combo. Do you know what? It's ridiculous. I was doing clear up behind here because I had to, and I actually found this. It was behind, so it's the
Oh Lord.
Ozzy's Dream from which is one of the best football songs there ever was, really, when you think about. But signed by Steve Perryman as well on the back,
Oh, nice.
which is and again Stevie Perryman, he was a special kind of guy as well. He's just the most upright and honourable and combined with fairly fierce midfield captain. A really good player as well, but just a man of impeachable integrity in that world. So he was another kind of mini hero. On the other hand, I really enjoyed. Sorry, now we're going on, but Graham Roberts is an absolute menace. He was just not so much a thug, it's a semi-thug, but he's just someone you wanted on your side when things got tough. So yeah, there's loads of them from that era, really. I mean, should there be more after that? Don't know, really. Not heroes. Yeah, it's because you're young, so you get heroes, don't you? But again, we used to win stuff then with those kind of players. So yeah, that's putting it.
Well, one of my favourite moments in football that Liverpool aren't a part of is the FA Cup final against City. The replay with Ricky Villa where he slaloms to score the winner. That I always say this. I'm not just a Liverpool supporter. I'm a football supporter as well. I like
Yeah,
watching good football, and that was two very good games. One,
yeah,
obviously, and then Spurs went on to win it. That's probably one
yeah,
of my favorites because it puts me back to the days of FA Cup final day.
yeah.
Your whole
What a day that
family
was.
would get together, and
Yeah,
from the moment you woke up there would be, the whole history of the FA Cup on the telly, the pre-match and everything. You'd kind of. I remember I was allowed a shandy. 11 years old. I'm allowed a shandy. I know it would shock some people probably over here, but we were allowed shandies.
yeah,
Back then. and then a cucumber cream cheese sandwich. Ooh, yeah, it's, living the high life. But I miss those days. But whenever I see that on YouTube, that FA Cup final, it just harks back to like a good memory of my life being
No, totally.
11 years old, just getting started in life and
Yeah.
thinking
And
about New
the
Year.
way the cup final, I mean, so right, the cup final was such a big thing for everyone. And then, and you were just saying 5 minutes ago, it's now not even a big thing when City win the Premiership, let alone the cup final, which no one actually remembers half the time apart from the teams competing, people sort of forget when, before it was May and it was the cup final. I think it was May. It was, yeah. And it just now, as you say, yeah, you'd be lucky if people give a monkeys about the Premiership. With Liverpool, I think people will. I think just people, they loved Klopp and loved his legacy. I think, it's very hard to find people that don't like Klopp. So and obviously the legacy's left and your current that, and so yeah, I think Liverpool are going to be, people appreciate Liverpool doing so well. I think.
I think so. I mean, you'll have like, City or United fans, or especially Arsenal fans, hating on Liverpool, but
Do Arsenal still do that? Yeah, I guess they.
oh, of
Yeah,
course you do. I've got a couple of Arsenal mates that just whine about everything. It's it. It's not our fault, you kind of bottle in the league again three seasons in a row. That's not
yeah,
my problem.
no,
We had the same a couple of seasons ago. We had 99 points, 92 points against City, lost by a point twice. So
yeah,
it's one of those that City are a juggernaut. And again, I think they've ruined football. I think money's ruined football.
yeah.
It's greed. That's all it is. How
Good.
many games like FIFA and UEFA, how many games can you fit in a calendar year? It's just
Yeah,
looking at these players like racehorses, not human
so,
beings. And, I kind of out of love with football, maybe 10 years ago. I wasn't watching it as much uh,
yeah.
just because of the greed.
No,
Um,
of course,
and again, the ticket prices, out pricing, your locals is wrong.
totally.
That's where the heart and soul is. I mean, I'm having a go against, people that travel 3,000, 5,000 miles to see Liverpool. Fair play to them. But if you don't have that local fan base inside the stadium, I think your heart and soul does go from the
No,
club,
of course,
you know.
goes without saying. I mean, now it's at the point where it's only the last 2 seasons when, as a Sky Sports subscriber, I can't see half the they're all on there. Everything's on TNT. I turn on and it's on TNT, and the wife's like, "No, you can't subscribe." It's just so they will, and I guess more stuff will move to other channels, and Sky Sports won't actually have. So yeah, it only goes one way, and I guess the European Super League comes at some point,
People
and
are
then
basically playing that now.
yeah,
Champions, I mean, that was the Super League. So yeah, that'll happen because of the money.
yeah.
And then they're talking about actually having Premier League games over in the States, which I'm just like,
I
come
haven't heard that one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That'll happen, I think,
Wow.
because it's money.
Yeah,
It's too good for these owners to go, nah, I won't do that. But again, that's what pre-season tours are for,
yeah.
to bring the club over to America, to Asia, Australia,
Yeah.
everywhere. So just stick with that. Don't do Premier League matches over here. It'll just take it's
That would be something, wouldn't it? Jesus.
So, what's your thoughts on Big Ange? He said he'd win something in the first 2 years, and obviously, well, I mean, you're still in one competition, so you might.
Tomorrow night is we could find that out. I mean, I suspect he doesn't get sacked now. I doubt it won't be done before the end of the season, will it? But I mean, what we've got tomorrow night, and then I think Chelsea away for the next game, and then the running actually isn't as terrible as it could be. Although when you're 13th, the running, and probably 14th, 15th by then possibly. So it'd be hard to unless it'd be hard to see him surviving. Everyone, I really like the man, and his. I mean, I'm on WhatsApp with some of my non-Spurs mates during a game. We could be 1-0 down or whatever, and or people enjoy watching Tottenham again at times. It's it can be end to end, but etc. It can be a lot of fun. But of course, you've got Daniel Levy sat there. Actually, it's a bit more complex because I think I remember looking at some numbers, just being nosy for Spurs, like last season, I think it was, where the income from, no one will be surprised to know that the income from the commercial enterprises at Spurs, which is obviously the live events, that, you know, this new ground is obviously fantastic for live events and sponsorship events and other stuff. I think it was twice the amount of the football income, because basically if you're not winning bugger all, then your income from TV rights, etc., I think diminishes all the time. So I do wonder if I wonder whether you could have someone like Ange sort of building slightly incrementally. We just dropped incrementally this season, but if it is good fun and people enjoy it, and I'm not talking about the fans at the ground because I never go anymore. I think we've always loved the moan, and I think everyone's having a good moan nowadays. But if it's good spectacle, there's good spirit, reasonable players. You know, maybe I wouldn't be surprised to see Ange improve from wherever we're finishing, 12, 13. You know, who knows, top 10 possibly this season. I'm not someone that lives and dies it anymore. I'd just as happily see. I mean, Spurs have a tradition of having a go at playing decent football, certainly attacking football, and never winning much. That's a long held tradition of ours. And I'm not hugely unhappy with that at all. But whether Daniel Levy and co, but as I say, it might be more complex about what Levy's priorities and focus is about. But I mean, you've got these protests against Levy now, and they're only going to build if we finish 13th with no silverware. So whether Ange survives, I wouldn't. Yeah, it would look a bit unambitious if he does stay on if we finish mid-table. So we shall see. He's a nice bloke.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. You know,
Yeah.
I think he's bring a little bit of just, he's honest. You know, he did a bit of whinging for a little bit for the refereeing. And I can totally understand, you know, like he's had a lot of injuries this season. You've got some young players that have shined, you know, and I think you should stick with him and see what happens next season. But it might be even better if you're not in Europe next season.
Yeah, because you ain't achieving unless you get to the
just concentrate on the domestic cups and the league and see.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I've told this story a few times. Like when my dad used to work in the Middle East, the Spurs squad went out there, and he got their autographs just to like piss me off, and brought back me a Spurs shirt to piss me off even more. And gave it to me, and I was like, you know, I support Liverpool, Dad. And he's like, yeah, but here you go. You know, so I've always had like a little soft spot for Spurs.
Right.
You know, I'll every now and again I'll look at the results for Spurs and be all right. You know, but yeah, Liverpool's always number one. But yeah, I've always had like.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
I think it's I mean, London clubs all despise Spurs, always have for all sorts of reasons. But outside of it, and again, it's because we don't win enough to make too many enemies. So nationally, you know, it's like you can enjoy a bit of Spurs end-to-end nonsense. You know, they're going to screw up at some point. We'll all start whinging, demand the board gets sacked, manager gets sacked every 18 months anyway, doesn't it? So there's normally something to enjoy with the Spurs sort of circus anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jerry, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely, I really enjoyed that.
I always say this, an hour goes by way too quickly when you're
Actually, I didn't even notice.
Yeah, when you're talking about something, you know, things.
Yapping on about football
that we actually know things about. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
No, you too.
Please, everyone, go out. I always say this at the end, you know, go out, find some new music, find new artists. They're always out there and they need to be heard. Bandcamp is a massive place to find that. Hooj is on Bandcamp, hooj.bandcamp.com. Go check out the oldies and the goldies. You know, put money in their pockets.
Lots of current as well. Not shit, but
current as well. Yeah, not just the old bangers.
No.
But Everyone, please like, subscribe, put your notifications on, and please look after one another. And we'll see you next time.